Hi everyone, my name is Jenn Miller and I'm the CEO of Renewable IPP, and our company put together the Puppy Dog Lake Solar Farm project. And so first off, I just want to say thank you for creating the opportunity to come meet with you all tonight. And honestly, there's been a bit of a reflection on my end. We did leasing land from the Mental Health Trust, which I think a lot of folks know. And we followed their process, which notified about the potential land lease in the Peninsula Clearing. And I was like, oh, that sounds good, And what I'm realizing now is there's obviously, we're falling short in that area that, folks weren't notified. And that the fact that you heard about it in the news first rather than from me or other project partners. So anyways, I do want to apologize for that, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everyone tonight. So thank you. Let's see. Okay, so basically I'm going to do, I don't have a long presentation, it's just like 6 slides. Sorry. And I'll give first just like a couple slides just so you can kind of get to know who our company is, who we are, what we do. And then I have a couple slides that are about like specifics about the project. And then we'll just open it up to Q&A. And I, at the counter there was just like a 1-pager fact sheet. And then we also have, I just kind of wrote up some frequently asked questions, not that we're like high frequency yet, but what I thought might be questions. And I can just update that too based on some of the questions we get tonight. And so, I think it's about that. And then it's myself, Jenn Miller. I'm the CEO, and I'm joined by Chris Pike, who's the project manager. And so, thank you for having us both. Okay, great. I guess just a little bit about me. I grew up in Eagle River, Alaska. Went to school in Idaho. I'm a mechanical engineer. I came back and worked in the oil and gas industry for 13 years. And the last 3 years of that, I did kind of nights and weekends working on this company with my husband and 2 other business partners. And so we're all engineers by background, and saw the potential for solar to be economic in Alaska, and that's what we put it on our rooftops and got excited about it, got a little overexcited about it, and started the company. And so, and then, like I said, I'll do a company overview, project overview, and then we'll get to Q&A. And so, so when we started the company, we were passionate about deploying renewable energy, but we wanted to do it in a way that suppresses energy prices. Alaska has some of the highest energy costs in the nation, and so we saw this, deploying kind of this proven technology as a way to, have another one, diversify our generation mix. About, depending on where you are in the state, 80 to 90% of our electricity generation is natural gas, and that works great, right? But the key is trying to diversify so we don't have all of our eggs in one basket. And then the other key is trying to suppress prices because our costs are so high. And the Puppy Dog Lake project it will sell energy for less than the current cost of generation. I'll go into that a little bit more, but we're really starting, we're delivering on that mission, which makes me feel good that we're heading on the right track. We're an Alaska-grown small business, so we're based in Anchorage. And then we've done 3 projects to date, 2 in Willow and 1 in Houston. So we've like an operations base in the Matsu. And then we'll be looking forward to 1 in the Kiwi. And then, so the company was founded by myself and my 3 business partners. And that's a photo of us and our dog when we did the Willow pilot project. And so there's the 4 of us, and then a company called Clean Capital joined the partnership in 2022, and they're based out of New York, and they finance the Houston Solar Farm project, and would be financing this Puppy Dog Lake project. And they finance solar projects and battery storage projects across the US, and so I think they're in 26 states and Guam. And it's nice because not only are they investing in our projects, but they've invested in our as a partner in our company. They're definitely invested in deploying solar in Alaska. So, and then there's an FAQ document, and I have a section about them and a link to their website if you want to learn more. And then the other partner I should mention for the Puppy Dog Lake project, we worked with Henry Kroll as a development partner out of Saldana, and so he's here tonight as well. And so our company is kind of unique because we've really learned the business from the ground up, working at all the stages across the project. And so we start with what's called development, which is finding a location for the project, working with the utility on the grid studies to make sure that it can technically tie into the grid and won't cause reliability issues. We do preliminary design, cost estimating, scheduling, and then we ultimately work on what's called a power purchase agreement with the utility. And that's the contract that allows us to sell power to the utility at wholesale rates. And the only way our projects move forward is if they're cost competitive with the utility's other generation sources. And so we can't say, hey, it's solar, we want you to pay us more. Like that, it just is, that's not a project that will move forward. And so,
it's working.
I think it just turned off. Can you guys hear me?
What's on?
Here in the
It's
front.
on.
It's on? I think the battery died. Oh wait, let's try it again. How about now? Okay, we're back. Anyway, so we do kind of all that preliminary work just to see, is the project viable? Can it move forward? Does it have legs? And then we work with companies, we work with Clean Capital to finance the project. And so they bring in private investment. And so Puppy Dog Lake is nearing the end of that development phase. And we're heading into the next big phase is kind of, you're doing detailed engineering, you're starting to firm up the design and finalize the design. And then you have to, once your design is really set, then do your procurement for major materials and then construction. And so, and then of course, once you finish construction, then you're in operations and maintenance. And so our company, for our past 3 projects, we have done all of those, all the way through the project. And so, and then Puppy Dog Lake is getting to a scale that for us to do as a small company doing the construction work, we're now looking at, we will competitively bid out the construction and oversee it, but then we will be the long-term operations and maintenance company. And so, so yeah, we'll go to the next slide. But we intentionally did worked our projects all the way through like that, because especially as engineers, you can say, oh, it's great to draw this on paper, it looks great, it's a great idea. And then you get to the field and you try to put it together that way, and you realize, oh wait, yeah, you can do this, but there's, if we did something else, you really learn when you go to actually build it, you learn so many optimizations. And so we've been able to, through the construction work, and now we've been operating for 6 years in Willow, and we're taking all those learnings and we put them into our new designs for our next project. And so our projects keep getting more and more efficient because we're not just planning the projects, we're actually seeing how they build and how they operate. And so we think that that's been something that's kind of distinguished us as a company, that we're very hands-on and we've really learned our business from the ground up. And so yeah, this is a timeline. In 2017, my husband and I and our other partner Sam, we put rooftop solar on our houses, and so we did our own little DIY projects. And we just saw just how simple the technology is, and just how cost competitive it is as well. And we thought, man, this seems to work really well. And we were kind of thinking about, well, man, how could you deploy more of this? And it's like, oh, do you do a lot of kind of small residential systems, or I've started as an engineer, but then moved into project management. And it's a lot easier to do one big project than 100 small ones, because they all have the same steps. And so if you can do one big one, you can really get economies of scale and focus on doing those steps well. And so then that's what kind of came up with the idea of utility scale solar. But it hadn't been done in the state before. And so we decided to start with a pilot project. It was 140 kilowatts, that's 408 panels. And myself and my 3 business partners, we funded that project ourselves, we designed it ourselves, and we built it. And we learned a lot in the process. And so that's the top photo, that's our partner Sam, and it's 2 rows. And yeah, we built that in the summer of 2018. And really the intent was to say, okay, you know, what does utility scale solar cost in Alaska? Does it, you know, is it, a lot of times people say, oh, if you're gonna build in Alaska, it's 2 times more. But we, you know, we said, okay, it needs to cost somewhere close to kind of lower 48 benchmarks for it to be competitive, and we found that we could build it for that. And so, and then we also figured out, we did a lot of analysis to figure out, well, how do you optimize solar for Alaska's climate and sun angle so that you get the best economics possible. And so the pilot project really proved up that cost model, and we also identified a bunch of design improvements through as we were building it and said, man, I wish we would have drawn this differently. And so then that project gave us the confidence to then do a 1.2 megawatt expansion. That project was 3,280 panels. And we know these numbers because we've been in every one of these builds. So they're imprinted in our minds. But anyways, for that project, we did, you know, then you're kind of like, each project you're taking on kind of the next level of sophistication. And so for that project, we had to agree a contract to sell power with the utility. It's called a power purchase agreement, a PPA. And so we worked that with Madanuska Electric. We agreed the contract. That project sells power for whatever the current cost of generation is, so it's cost neutral. So it wasn't quite delivering on our mission yet, but it was the first utility scale solar contract in the state, and it was approved by the Regulatory Commission. And then we became a licensed general contractor, hired all local labor, and delivered that project under budget and in less than a year. Now we could do that because given its size and that we had just done the pilot in the same site. We then worked on our 8.5 megawatt Houston Solar Farm project, which came online in 2023. And that's the first project where we're really delivering on our mission, where we're selling energy for less than the current cost of generation for MEA, so they're saving money with the solar energy. And again, that contract, we were the first independent power producer, so I should have started there. An independent power producer is a privately owned generation site that wholesales energy to the utility. And so it's a nice complement. Like, I guess in the past, sometimes independent power producers and utilities would kind of butt heads, and we approach this as like, okay, we have to prove that we're delivering something that's valuable to the utility and their members, and we worked really collaboratively with Madanuska Electric, and that's what ultimately enabled our projects to be successful. They know the grid, they know how to analyze it and look at the reliability issues. We can understand solar and how to do that efficiently. And so you really need both skills to make a project work. It's not one or the other. And working with Homer Electric has been the same way. We've worked really collaboratively with them. You know, we've analyzed a bunch of different design options, and you really need folks looking at it from multiple angles to really make that project work. And so I just like to emphasize that because I think it's really important. The Houston Solar Project was funded by Clean Capital, as I mentioned, and that was the first kind of large institutional investment in solar in the state. So it really is another set of eyes looking at it and saying, hey, you know, we looked at the production, we looked at the cost, the ongoing costs, and we think this works. And it works at a price that is attractive to the utility and saves their members money. So it was a strong validation that utility scale solar does work in Alaska. Yeah, so we go to the next one. Okay, why we're here. And so this is an overview of the Puppy Dog Lake Solar Farm project, and this is the preliminary design. And so before we go over the numbers, so we have leased land from the Mental Health Trust. It's a total of 680 acres, and so that's the red boundary. And then what we have planned is this west and east array. It's about 320 acres. And there's these 2 arrays, and then they'll tie into a substation here, and And then that ties into these transmission lines that are along Escape Route Road. And so access to the site would be from Escape Route Road. And then the other important thing is we are fencing these two separately and wanted to leave this wildlife corridor in the middle so that large animals can still move through the site. And so, you know, we do the land lease is for that 680 acres. You know, there could be a potential for a phase 2 down the road. I can tell you right now, we're not analyzing that, we're not working on plans for that because we need to see if phase 1 works. I mean, not that if it works, but we need to prove that it works. And potentially there could be a phase 2, but we're not working on that right now. Okay, the project, it'll have a rated output of 30 megawatts. But we actually, because I think as everyone knows, Alaska has a lot of cloudy days. And so we have a lot of suboptimal production days. And so to maximize the economics, we actually install about 50% more in panel capacity. So we have 45 megawatts in panels, 30 megawatts rated output. And so then on those cloudy days, we can still produce near peak and get more production out of the site. And so sometimes you'll see, you know, for like the contract with Homer Electric, it's a 30 megawatt contract because that's what we're allowed to sell to them. So we're limited at that, but we put in more panel capacity to optimize the site. We're leasing land from the Mental Health Trust, and the Mental Health Trust takes our lease, the rent that we pay for that land, and uses it for mental health services in the state. And so it is money that stays here in the state, which is positive. 100% of the energy will be sold to Homer Electric, and so there aren't any other, Homer Electric is buying all the energy, and then I keep harping on this, but it'll be for less than the current cost of generation, so we'll be selling energy for 7.4 cents, and the current cost of generation is 9 cents. And the way the contract works is it's 25 years, and it escalates at 1.5% per year. And the reason it was set up that way is because the Fed target for inflation is 2%. And so we wanted to stay below that target so that we could be suppressing prices long term. And so, so that's a huge selling point for the project because that savings passes directly on to the Homer Electric members, which is this community. The project will meet 12% of Homer Electric's energy demand, and it'll double the amount of renewable energy for HEA. There will be about 60,000 solar panels, and we'll be using what are called bifacial solar panels, so they produce both on the front side and the back side. And so we actually get really good production in like February, March, and April because of all the reflective light off the snow hits the backside of those panels, and it boosts the production, which is pretty cool. And right now, our estimated construction timing, the bulk of production would be, our construction would be like 2026, 2027, but we might start tree clearing late in 2025 after the migratory bird window. And then right now we're estimating about 40 to 60 construction jobs, and that would be, they're the local jobs. So we can go to the next slide. This is just kind of a high-level schematic to kind of just help frame up, you know, the stages that these projects go through. And so they start in what's called the development phase, and that's where's the project going to be, doing environmental reviews for that location, doing the preliminary design, working with the utility on grid studies, and then also working on, like I said earlier, the power purchase agreement. Now, the big press release that came out in August, that was that the power purchase agreement had been agreed and was approved by the Homer Electric Board. So that's the step we just finished. And then now the contract is with the Regulatory Commission for their review and approval. And then financing is doing their, it's called due diligence. It's kind of like when you apply for a mortgage and they look at, you know, what's the home inspection say about the house, how's the quality. It's kind of the same thing, like going through and looking at the design. And we work with Clean Capital on that. And the nice thing is because they're a partner in Renewable IPP. We've been working due diligence for this project since 2021. And so we don't expect any surprises. Once we're through all those final approvals, which we're estimating by probably second quarter in 2025, then we'll move into what's called the execution phase, which is doing the final detailed engineering, purchasing equipment. Some of the equipment has, we're trying to see if we can improve it, but some of the like high voltage transformers or high voltage breakers, they can have a 2-year lead time. And so we'll do kind of the final engineering details for those pieces of equipment this in 2025, issue the purchase order, and then we have to wait for it to arrive. And then there's of course construction, which we would ideally start in 2026, and then finish up in 2027, ideally like mid to late summer, so we can get some amount of sun before we hit winter. And then we do detailed commissioning with the utility to test the system, test communications between the grid and our system to make sure that, if the utility sends us a shutdown signal, that we shut down. And so we do all that testing before we fully go live. And then we enter the operations phase, and the initial term for this is 25 years. But solar farms have a useful life of 40 years or more. And the panels are warranted for 30 years. So it is a long-term operation, a long-term asset. And we'll have local operations and maintenance folks that are hired from this community that are monitoring the site daily, doing snow blowing, vegetation management, system troubleshooting. They're very simple systems, but there's a lot of equipment out there. So it does require care and oversight. Okay, and then just to give you an overview of like what we've completed to date and what the next steps are. So we do have a land lease agreed with the Mental Health Trust. On the environmental side, we completed it's called a Phase 1 ESA, and that's really just assessing the site to see if there's ever been any like historical contamination or hazardous materials. That review is done. We've completed a bald eagle survey and did not find any nests. We'll do another survey before construction starts to confirm that. We've done a wetland delineation. There's a little lake in the middle, and that is a wetland, but we're not building on or near that. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Alaska Department of Fish and Game have also reviewed the project. We've completed our preliminary design and cost estimate, and so, we've incorporated a lot of learnings from our past projects into this design. And we've completed, one of the key things I was telling Len about is that one of the key things for a solar farm is having a good foundation. So we've done geotech studies, and we've also done foundation testing to make sure that when we have frost heave in the wintertime, that it doesn't move, our foundations don't move up and down throughout the winter. Because we do want the site to last 30 to 40 years. We have selected our major equipment, so we know roughly, we know we're going to do roughly like 700 watt class panels. We've picked out our foundation racking system. We've also picked out our inverters, which convert the electricity from the panels, which is direct current, to alternating current, so it can tie in with the grid. And then we most recently agreed the power purchase agreement with Home Electric. And so the next steps are that the contract is with the Regulatory Commission, and so they need to approve that contract. And so they're an oversight body to say, hey, that we think that this project is in the interest of the utility members. And so they'll be looking at it to make sure that it doesn't cause reliability issues to the grid, and that the price is competitive for the HEA members. And then right now we're working on putting together a request for proposals for the construction, and we're talking to Alaska companies for that. And so we're working on that. We'll be bidding out the work and selecting the preferred contractor for the job, and that'll really kind of set what the final construction schedule is. So I'm kind of run through a list here, but I do want to emphasize, I guess, through tonight's comments, I mean, we are very, very interested in hearing feedback and comments from the group here. And we do have a preliminary design, but there is still time to influence that design with feedback. And so Chris is going to be, we're both here, we wanted to have a couple sets of ears listening so that we can take feedback and input. And if helpful, we can kind of take that back. And if it's helpful for us to come back in a couple months, we'd be happy to do that. We don't want to bore you too many nights in a row, but just let us know. We're open to it. I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, so we can open it up to questions about the project, and there's an FAQ document, and I'll post that on our website, so folks, because I don't think there were a ton of copies, but I've listed some of the topics that are covered, but happy to also just take questions from the audience.
So what are your design improvements that make them superior to others?
Okay, yeah, so one thing is that for one, we elevate our panels 3 feet above the ground, and that allows the snow to shed off our panels, so compared to like a lower 48 site. We use the bifacial panels so that we can produce on the front and the back side and get about a 10% production gain. And then for this system, we'll be using what's called tracking. And so the arrays will they'll follow the sun throughout the day. And we get about a 15 to 20% production gain from that as well. And so all these things and we have a really high panel capacity compared to our rated output, because again, that helps us on our cloudy days to maximize production.
Jen,
Yeah.
would you mind repeating the question?
Oh, I will. And so that was the question: is what design improvements are we deploying on this project? And I kind of just tried to emphasize some of our Alaska design considerations too.
So really this right there is only good for 40 years max? Then you sweep it all away?
So the question is if what we install is only good for 40 years max, then what happens after 40 years? And so one is, under the land lease with the mental health trust, is we are required to remediate the site and remove everything. What I will say is that, what I would hope for is that we would renew the lease and extend it and keep the site operational. And so while we'll say the useful life for solar farms is 40 plus years, their warranty for 30, they can keep going longer and longer. They only degrade about 0.5% per year. And so really, once the system is paid off and it's still producing, even though it's degrading, you can keep going for a lot longer. And so really, I would see that as an initial life, and you can extend it for longer, or you could say, we're going to come through and put new panels on the existing foundation. So there's a lot of options, and I would just see kind of that first 25 to 40 years is like the initial life, and I would foresee a rejuvenation or something, an effort to keep the site operational. But in the event that it doesn't get rejuvenated or extended, we are required to remediate the site and return it back to, we have to remove our foundation piles, remove the panels, remove everything.
Yeah, something better will be invented in 40 years,
Yeah.
I hope, yeah. And then this will be my last question, if anybody else will ask one, I got a bunch. Where are you going to put all that junk? Do you put it underground, or where do you recycle it?
It's a good question. So the question is when we do have to remove all the equipment from the site, where does it all go? And so right now, the industry, because there haven't been many solar farms in operation for 40 years, and so the industry is now developing technology on panel recycling, and how do we recycle, 90 to 100% of the materials, the raw materials that make up solar panels. And so that keeps evolving each year, and I think by year 40, that technology will be there. But the steel for the foundation and racking, that can all get recycled. There's a potential where, like for the substation, we'll have like large transformers. And if those still have good life, there's a chance that maybe HEA or another utility may want to say, hey, we'll keep that in our yard, and if we have an outage, we could deploy that transformer at another location. And so there's definitely an effort to look at how to maximize all those materials and put them to use, so it's not just landfill.
When you were talking about the connection between AGA and your site, you mentioned that you had to test to make sure everything works well between them. And I believe you said, so like if they send a message to shut down, we can shut down. But what does that entail for you to shut down?
Yeah, no, that's a great, so the question is I mentioned earlier that we do site testing, it's called commissioning, where we work testing our site and our communications with the home electric grid, so that if they were to send us a shutdown signal, that works. And so the question is how does that work? And so then basically what it's called is an electrical breaker. And that breaker, when it's closed and the metal is contacting, current and electricity can flow through it. But when it goes to the open position, then you lose contact. And just like in your house, like where you have a panel in your, say your garage or something, and you have those breakers, that's exactly what those switches are doing, is they're either making contact or they're opening contact. And so then it disconnects our site from the grid.
So if you have to do that disconnect, where does the electricity go that you are generating when it's not going into the main grid?
Good question. So the follow-up question is, when we're disconnected, where does the energy go? And so the energy, the panels are live. If it's daylight, they are producing. There's no on-off switch for the panels. And so really the site is just, it's staying live, it's staying energized, but it has nowhere to go. And so for those times when we're disconnected, we're not selling power, we're not producing power, but outages are frequent enough that it's not a large impact.
Who's selling the panels to start with? You said there's a lag time.
Yeah, good. So the question is who's going to sell us the panels for the project, and what is the lead time to get those panels? And so the good news in this place, so a year ago when I got asked that question, there were just some, so a year ago, the U.S. manufacturing capacity for solar panels was about 0.2% of worldwide demand for panels. And so while there were a couple of U.S. panel manufacturers that we could reach out to, they said, hey, our whole capacity is subscribed and you can't get them. Now there is a lot more companies are moving their manufacturing to the U.S. and there's a big conference every year. It's called RE+. And I just went to it in September and spoke to kind of our top 5 preferred panel providers, and 3 of them are starting new factories in the U.S. and they may have panels available in time for this project. So we may be able to get U.S. manufactured panels. Some of the components will still come from overseas, and then each year they're going to be ratcheting up what percentage of those panels are made domestically. So they'll probably start where like 40 to 50% is all U.S. sourced and manufactured, and then they're going to keep increasing that with each year.
Is there a government restriction that says you have to have American panels?
There's a government incentive, and so if you source domestic panels, not just panels though, it's for the whole project, you have to look at what's called, I'm getting a little technical, but it's called domestic content. And so it's what percentage of your project was sourced from the US. And if you reach that threshold, then you can get an additional tax incentive for 10%.
Yeah, I think this is going on time, my question, but what part of this has to do with taxpayer money?
Okay, so the question is what part of the project has to do with taxpayer money? And so the main thing is this project is taking advantage of the federal investment tax credit. And so that's available for solar, wind, battery storage. And so that legislation was passed in it was actually passed, gosh, I don't know the original years, but it was throughout the 2010s, and it kept it got extended under Trump, and then it was extended again with the Inflation Reduction Act. And so this project will take advantage of those tax incentives, and then those are, because those tax incentives reduce the cost of the project, that passes through on the energy price that comes to the HE members. And so it does, that's what drives down the energy price, and it passes back through to HE members.
Well, does the borough get any tax money from the land leasing, or do they just get the regular taxes from the mental health trust?
So the borough will get property tax income for the land, but the state exempts new generation projects. Given our energy supply issue, they're trying to incentivize more new generation projects, but so that the main borough tax revenue will be on the land. And then the mental health trust gets the land lease rent income that goes to mental health services.
Okay, well, I do think you've done a terrible job communicating with the neighbors that are just next door to this, and that's me. I am concerned that I have to drive by there every day. I have to hike those trails that I've been hiking out there. 40 years I've been hiking right out here. And now I gotta look at that. So the aesthetic thing for me is huge. And just to drive and see that. Now I've flown over the one in Willow. I mean, it's way out in the boondocks. Nobody sees that unless you fly over it, right? That's what I noticed.
And I think, and maybe, so the Willow Solar Farm is just right along the Parks Highway, but the Houston project, you're right, is off of Hog Lane past the middle high school, and so that one's a little further off.
So can you move this farther out to my eyesight?
So I guess, Chris, can we go back to the layout? And I guess I'll talk just a little bit about, so the panel structures themselves are going to be about 11 feet tall. And so, and there will be, trees surrounding the property. And so beyond the trees, you won't be able, the trees will be taller than what the solar arrays are. And, the main, here's Escape Route Road, and then, you'll be able to see the substation from the road, but then the arrays will be further back.
But not if I'm hiking back there, those are my trails. But I'm saying, can you move them 5 miles away from this location and still put it together okay?
So the difficult part is, so because we have to tie into the grid, the further out that we move from those transmission lines, it drives up the cost of the project and then the energy costs to where it's harder to compete and deliver that value.
Why did you choose this area? What made it beneficial to you?
Yeah, that's a great, so the question is why did we choose this area? Why did we choose this land site? And so really, the first thing we look for is where are the power lines, because we have to tie into those. And so as you can see in this diagram, these are the transmission lines right along Escape Route Road, and they pretty much intersect the property. And for our Houston site, the power lines are across the road. For Willow, they're on the property. And so because it's called the interconnection cost, and the project has to pay for that cost and bear the full cost and lump that into the energy price. And so it's really key to keep these projects competitive is we have to be really close to the grid. The second thing is good soils. Because we're putting in that foundation, the foundation cannot move. Because, throughout that long operating life, if you had to go and mitigate frost heave each year, you would eat your lunch in operations and maintenance costs. So good soils, also flat land, that relatively flat and not a lot of topography, so that we don't have to do a lot of grading. And so really good soils and close to the grid and a large enough parcel for the solar farm is really what drives the location. Thank you.
From your company standpoint, you've got 3 locations.
is our company has 3 locations, and we're spread out across the state. And so how are we going to operate or control this site here? And so we'll be hiring a local plant manager that will be monitoring the system daily, doing any troubleshooting, doing snow blowing, system repairs. And so we'll have that plant manager plus assistant positions, anywhere from 2 to 5 assistant positions helping, and this will all be a local operations base within the Kenai Peninsula, because it needs to be somebody that can go to the site daily. And we work with Home Electric's dispatch on a daily basis to say, here's what we're predicting we're going to produce tomorrow. That influences how it's called nominate for how much gas they plan to use for the rest of the generation. And so there has to be a site dedicated person in this area. And then we have an operations and maintenance lead who works for us in Matsu, and she's worked for us for 5 years and runs the Willow and Houston site. And so one thing that's kind of nice is as we grow our operations and maintenance team, then we can also have like vacation coverage, and when somebody's out, like have coverage between our team members. So thank you. I think there's a question here.
A couple questions. One, how long is your current lease with the mental health?
Okay, the question is how long is our current lease with the Mental Health Trust? And so it's a 30-year operations lease, and it has options for extension.
And the next question, just to put it in perspective, you said the East Array is 320 acres. So for a comparison with the Houston project, how many acres is that?
Okay. And so the question is basically how many acres do the arrays take up, and how does it compare to the Houston site? And so actually the acreage of the West Array, and the East Array is 320 combined. And I should have been more clear about that. And then the Houston Array is 45 acres.
45?
Yes.
Okay, so years ago, 20 years ago, they built out a generation project out here that was using steam from the refineries. And when that thing would kick on, shut off, and do stuff, we would get like brownouts, power outages, and stuff like that a lot. How's that going to work with your facility?
Okay, so the question is in the past there was, it sounds like a steam generation plant, and as it kicked on and off, there were a lot of brownouts or power outages, related to that. It's not truly intermittent power, but that intermittency. And so one thing about solar, it is intermittent power. And it comes up and down, and as a cloud comes over, we drop down. And as it goes away, we come back up. And so part of the study was looking at how does this system work with Homer Electric's current battery that's in Sultana, and also they're adding more battery storage. And so what's pretty cool is that there's fiber communication cable that also runs along these transmission lines, and so we've tied in with fiber. And what's exciting about that is we can communicate with the battery on the millisecond scale, as opposed to seconds or minutes. And so because like when you're trying to control the grid and keep the frequency stable, milliseconds matter. And so that was part of the whole study, is looking at what that communication pathway is, how fast the battery can react, and is it sized adequately to handle what's called like the ramps from this site, and we found that it is. So the battery is the answer.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Somewhere in your presentation, you mentioned the 30 megawatt limit. Is that a government limit? Is that a hardware limit? Why 30 megawatt, not 45?
Okay, so the question is why is the project capacity limited at 30 megawatts? And so 30 megawatts, and that kind of fed into this what's called an integration or interconnection study, is you say, okay, so Homer Electric's battery is a 40 megawatt battery. And so if we drop down, the cloud comes over and say we drop down to 10 megawatts of output, then that battery has to inject 20 megawatts of power. And so really we size it in a way that everyone was comfortable, that like beyond a doubt that the battery could handle the intermittency of the project and that we wouldn't cause reliability issues to the grid. And so we didn't want to go too big because we wanted to do a size that we were all like, okay, yeah, we're confident that this is a good size that works.
So it's not a regulatory function, it's a hardware function.
It's a technical and, kind of each one of our, so I mean, some of it's like we're learning the business and we're scaling with each project. But another too is like we're also seeing, we work with MEA, Nabisco Electric, and they're saying, okay, all right, we did 140 kilowatts. Okay, that worked. Okay, we did 1.2 megawatts. Okay, that worked. And we just kind of keep seeing how solar integrates with the grid, and we get more and more comfortable each step we take, but we take steps instead of just going on the way. So, thank you.
So there's nobody in Alaska that invested in you? It's the company in New York that did?
Yes. So
Is that?
yeah. So the question is why couldn't we find an Alaska company to invest in what we're doing, in our solar projects, and why do we have to get funding from New York? And so we did. We searched pretty far and wide within Alaska for about a year and a half, 2 years. And the one thing that does make these projects complicated is actually on the finance side. If you want to harvest those federal tax incentives, you need to have a large tax base to be able to do that. And it's also, there's a lot of paperwork and requirements to make sure that you're qualifying, that you're dotting your I's and you're crossing your T's to make sure that you qualify for those tax incentives. And there wasn't, unfortunately, there wasn't a company in Alaska that was familiar with those types of investments. And then we searched kind of across the U.S. and we met with multiple investment companies. And we actually worked with Clean Capital for 2 years before we all decided, hey, let's do Houston together. And we met every single week. And we got to know their team. And a lot of firms we reached out to, even within Alaska, there was kind of a solar in Alaska, does that work? I don't know if I want to bite that off. And when we met with Clean Capital, they said, that sounds pretty cool, like let's look into it. And they kind of always had that sentiment, and they've always carried it through, and they're willing to kind of roll their sleeves up and look into it, look at the technical facts, and like kind of get past that perception of solar in Alaska. Wait a minute, they're actually like, oh wait, no, these are the production numbers. Okay, this could work. And so I know I wish we would have found an Alaska company. That being said, I think it's really cool that we're attracting private investment to the state, and I will say Clean Capital has been a phenomenal partner for us. They've stood by us, and we work. We operate the Houston site for them, and it's been really good.
I'd like to visit with you after your presentation. Someone out the Data Association may have some resources for your project.
Oh, okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
So did the state of Alaska give you any money?
So the question is did the state of Alaska give us any money? For the Willow project, we applied, so there's the Alaska Energy Authority, and that's kind of the energy agency for the state. And so for our Willow expansion project, we applied for a loan to fund part of that project, and they approved a loan for that. And then for Houston, they also, they can do loans for like projects that are 10 megawatts and smaller. And so we also have a loan with them for the Houston project. For the Puppy Dog Lake Solar Farm project, we applied for a grant. They have a program called the Renewable Energy Fund, and we were awarded a $2 million grant for this project. And we'll be applying that to reduce the impact, because the substation is a pretty big cost adder to the project. And so we're using that grant to help reduce the pain of that substation cost.
So basically, this is a done deal. And is there, except for finding a spotted owl in there, it's going to happen. Why 25 and not 24 for putting the first shovel there?
So we have to, so the regulatory commission has to approve the contract.
They haven't done that yet.
Right.
Oh, there
Yeah.
is a way on.
Yeah, so it's not, it's, and so, and when they do, if and when they do approve it, then that's when you can say, okay, we have all the project approvals in place. Now we can purchase equipment. Okay, that kicks off lead times, and you don't want to start construction too far in advance of when you come online, because if you're spending dollars, say 3 years in advance of when you're going to have revenue, that hurts your economics. And so that's why 25 instead of 24.
Have you had any problem with vandalism in the other three?
So the question is, have we had any issues with vandalism at our other sites? We have not had any vandalism at the Willow site. Unfortunately, we did have, I think it was potentially some neighbor kids that, it looks like they used a slingshot and were successful, unfortunately, this past summer, and got some holes in our panels. In Houston, we do have a lot of spare panels, and so we replaced them. You still, even if you have a hole in the solar panel, there's what's called 144 cells, and so there's all these, so you have a hole in that one cell, so you're technically still producing 143 out of 144. But as those cracks and stuff are in the panels, and because we had spares, we said, hey, let's go ahead and replace this. And kind of we also didn't want to, we wanted to show, hey, if somebody's watching this site, we're taking action, those are getting replaced. So that's the main incident we've had, unfortunately. It was a small number of panels.
So what are the things, you're putting up some fencing.
Yeah.
I'm assuming part of the fencing is just general security, correct, right? You're trying to keep people from going in there and doing things they shouldn't, or getting hurt, but you also mentioned in there for animals, large animals, I'm assuming for moose. That's prime moose habitat right there. That's been logged, there's lots of shrubbery. It's perfect for moose vegetation. They breed in there, they live in there, they raise their young in there. In fact, inside your 320 acres, I've shot 3 moose. I'm looking at this map, and I'm like, ugh.
I know.
And
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I think 4 inside the red area.
Okay.
Yeah, so and out on the south land, I've probably in that area, and on the other side of the road, I've probably done 10. So, there's a lot of moose in that area, and of course, there's other animals as well. There's coyotes and wolves and bears, and, all the small game stuff as well. And then I also heard you say that they're reading about the shrubbery for 3 feet, and then you're going to be snow blowing. So how is that going to work with keeping 3 feet of shrubbery and then snow blowing as well? Because it seems like the snow blowing, you never remove the shrubbery.
Okay, yeah, so the first part of the question is about, why do we put the fence up? Is that for security, wildlife, safety? So I'll touch on that. And then the second part of the question is, okay, if we're mulching the vegetation and it's 3 feet tall, how are we snow blowing? So the first part is, so we do have to put up a fence around the property, one for electrical safety, because it is a live producing site. We do need to keep the public out of the site from a safety perspective, because they might touch something that they're not aware of. Secondly, yes, to keep wildlife out. And so it's about a 7.5 or 8 foot high fence, and we do use wildlife fencing instead of chain link, so that really small animals can still migrate through the site. And then on the second part of your question, I'm repeating it.
The shrubbery. And
Thank you, the shrubbery. And so we'll if this is the solar row here, right here we'll mulch close to the ground, where the skid steer goes through and snow blows. So about 7 feet in front of the panels, it'll still leave the root mass, but we'll take it down to the ground. But then in front of that, until say that's the next row, that's where we do the 3 feet, and you leave the base vegetation and have the native plants. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, you're exactly right. We would chew up our snowblower in a heartbeat.
But
Fish and Game's gonna be reviewing your plans when?
Yeah, so
Okay.
Fish and Game actually already has reviewed the project, and so is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And so, and then, yeah, something that we've done with this project, given its size, is we did intentionally fence separately the two sides of the array so that we could have a wildlife corridor for the large animals.
Is that, because there's like a kind of a road right there that runs down, I think there's a power line.
This is another transmission line. It's another loop as part of the system. And then there is this lake here.
Yeah, is that gonna be gated off or anything?
Nope.
It'll be
Yeah, that'll be open. Yep.
people to use.
And it seemed like people maybe use this as access, so we didn't want to fence that off.
That's sweet.
So I'm finding it really hard to believe that solar is less expensive or equally as expensive as hydro. Because that dam HEA did south was the best thing they've ever done. So I don't know how you're beating that. And it makes me very suspicious. No one in Alaska wanted to invest in your company.
So the question is it's hard to believe that solar could be more cost competitive than hydro, and then also just bringing up the fact that we couldn't find a local Alaska investor for the project, just raising concerns. And so the hydro project, so Bradley Lake Hydro, that is actually some of the cheapest power within Alaska on the grid. Now it was built, does anybody actually, I'm trying to remember the year that it was commissioned. But the reason, one of the reasons it's so cheap is the debt for that project is paid off. And so then the price, once that debt is paid off, boom. Now I think the average price is around 5 cents a kilowatt hour. But before, when that project first came online, it was some of the most expensive power within the grid. And so it's kind of a mechanics of financing and paying off debt. I will say that, I mean, I think finding the right entity that can take advantage of the tax incentives, that is tough to find within our state. And then also an entity large enough and familiar with these types of projects, like to know how to do due diligence for them. Because there just wasn't a lot of experience in the state. So I think that's another reason we had a hard time finding a local company to fund these.
Well, I would just like to say that, like, we have our Marathon refinery out here, formerly Tesoro, it was just Tesoro, and Agrium and Phillips. Those guys all had to have turnarounds done or shutdowns to do maintenance on them. They were able to do turnarounds and maintenance with some local people, but a lot of times they had to contract with a company out of California or out of Louisiana or Texas to come up and do those shutdowns. They would hire a lot of local people, but they'd bring their own people up because the people that need to be able to do that kind of work needs to have the knowledge on how to do that work. And then they hire a bunch of roustabouts. The roustabouts can't go in and do a shutdown that's a $250 million project. So I imagine it's the same thing here. You're trying to find somebody that's able to do this within the state, and like she was saying, to dot your I's and cross your T's. You got to have somebody that's got the expertise to do that. And we just don't have that kind of expertise in the state. We don't have 1 million people in the state, so we're still growing. Versus some of these other places that have been developed for 250 years.
And I think, new renewable energy projects, that's just something, we've been in the state, folks have put up like a personal wind turbine or put solar on their roofs, but doing this like utility scale, we're the first company doing it. And so, developing that expertise in the state, it's still maturing as an industry. So I think that's a really good point.
I'd throw in the fact that your company and the people that you are partnered with are all Alaskans.
Yeah.
And I think that's very encouraging. You're from here, and you got a stake in what the outcome. I think that's very positive.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, yeah, and we are passionate about doing these projects in a way that it does, again, suppress energy prices, and we're deploying like known technologies that we know will work and that are reliable. And so, yeah, we are very invested in this state, and we want to have a positive impact. And I know a lot of people say that, but I truly do believe that.
One of the other things too is I was at a previous meeting, not for this project, but representatives from HEA had been there and spoke about diversification. So HEA, if they're using natural gas, they've got a dam and using batteries and stuff like that, but they're trying to diversify as well. So that way they're not getting all their stuff from one source. Like if they have a problem, they have other options, and they're able to, better feed the grid as we grow. And I think that's essential, that we have our Homer Electric Association is trying to diversify our electricity to our homes and to our businesses, because, we still have on the books possibly a great big project coming in. What's that going to do for the electrical grid? If you got natural gas coming in and they're trying to ship it to Asia, and other projects like that. And so we have to think about that. One of the things they're trying to figure out is where they're going to get water from, because the amount of water they need, they're trying to find a well big enough. So there's a lot of stuff that we have to think about. And it might be inconvenient that I'm not going to be able to shoot anyone loose there. It might be inconvenient because we won't be able to hike the trails or ride horses. I got friends that they ride horses down those trails. And I feel everybody always wants to, hey, put it in someone else's backyard, not my backyard. And I think as Nikiski, being able to embrace some different options other than, hey, we got, a bunch of platforms in natural gas. We're known as the oil capital of Alaska, Nikiski. It's been that way for 50 years. And so to be able to embrace some of these other options and stuff like that is, I think, a good thing. Taking the first steps. You just don't know where it's going to lead in the future for development for our area.
Cleanest project.
Cleanest project, yeah.
Thank you. That's good perspective. And one thing, there was a HEA area meeting here last night, actually. We had set this up, and then I found out about that, and I was like, oh, great, all right, 2 nights in a row, cool. So anyways, but Brad Janorski from Homer Electric was talking about one of the values of the project from their perspective is that this has a known contract price for the next 25 years. And he's like, I don't know what the price of gas is going to do, and it's good and it could go up, it could come back down, but it's nice to not have all our eggs in one basket or have our energy prices linked, and to have some independence by having diversified energy. And so, yeah, thanks for bringing that